So I don't know about anything in the way of an introduction, except there's one thing on my mind, that is how difficult it is to learn Pali, and how, in my experience, other people's experience of learning Indic languages, a lot of people drop out quite quickly after they start. Probably some of you may not realize how difficult it is, how much work is required. And so I'll say that this is going to be attempting to follow a fairly traditional program of learning Pali, which is a lot of work. Because you don't get that much out of casual learning. There's just so much basic information you have to have memorized, and concepts you have to have grasped, but more the memorizing part, in order to even keep up and understand what's going on. So be clear that that's what this is. I don't know that that has to be said. I mean, the people who are going to leave are going to leave, but be forewarned, I guess. Don't feel bad if you do end up leaving. At least you won't be surprised. The two books we're going to be using are the Pali textbook and the Chakupala reader. Both of them are in the pinned comments, pinned messages for this channel, for the Pali study group channel. You can find the links there. They are on Google Docs. There's also a PDF of the reader, because you might want to print it out. I don't know that the PDF is better for that or not. Actually, the PDF might be a bit outdated, because I have edited the Google Doc in the meantime. I'm going to try to go through it a little slower this time. I think that might help people who are struggling to keep up. I think I have a tendency to go too quickly. Part of it is I don't actually have a background in teaching Pali, and I think there is some requirement of knowing having a skill in teaching languages that I don't have, because I've never cultivated it, or not much. I mean, I have taught this for many years, but only a few times. I suppose that's better than nothing. And my knowledge of Pali is by no means great, so you'll find me making mistakes, telling you I don't know, and having to look things up quite often. If you're expecting something professional, well, this isn't it. So today what we're going to go over is the Pali alphabet. That's page 1 in the textbook. This textbook, by the way, isn't explaining things, so you couldn't use this as a standalone to learn Pali. It's more of a reference. It's more like slides in a lecture. I'll probably be writing on it and then erasing what I've written. So if you want to take notes, those of you who are studious, it might be a good idea. It might even be a good idea to print this out so you can scribble on it yourself. But this is just a reference for me as to what to teach. If someone somewhat day wants to make an actual textbook out of it, by all means, go ahead. One thing to note, especially for this part, is that we're going to look at the language fairly scientifically, not on a phonetic or a linguistic level, but we are going to dissect the language, because this is the traditional way of understanding the language and the difference between the letters. the first thing to understand is that each letter has its own sound. It's not like English where you have lots of letters and some of them sound the same in certain instances and so on. No, these letters serve a purpose. Each one serves a distinct purpose. There's only one that's a little bit iffy, and that's the very last one. It serves a purpose, but it hides itself as some of the others. And another thing you'll see is that letters, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you'll see that letters take each other's place or are substituted with each other, but that's a different issue. When any of the letters appears, one great thing about learning Pali is that you know exactly what it's going to sound like. It's not like English where you have to ask someone or hear someone say it. Once you know how that letter sounds, it never changes its sound, theoretically. It doesn't. When you actually pronounce it, it's of course going to sound in context with the other letters, but they are all distinct. Just like English, it's separated into two groups. These are the Sara, and these ones are the Bhyanjana. Sorry, all of these ones actually. So we would say vowels and consonants, but the words they use give a different meaning. Sara is the essence, so it's the essence. Well, it's the essence of sound production, but it's also the essence of syllables. Pali goes very much by syllables, and we're going to get into that next week, I think. I think we're going to go very slowly and just do the alphabet today. But the essence of each syllable is a vowel, right? Because this one here, the doesn't make any sound besides that's all it has. So to actually say something meaningful, you have to add a vowel to it before or after it to make a syllable. That's why these are the essence. Vyanjana are what separate the vowels out. So you almost never see two vowels together. It almost like it's so rare. It does happen actually, but it's so rare that you can say for all intents and purposes it just doesn't happen. They're separated by the Vyanjana. That's what Vyanjana means. Okay, so your first task, and this is your first homework I'll give you in advance, is going to be to memorize the alphabet in this order. First these ones, then these ones, row by row. This is the order in which you recite them. And then these ones. A, I, U, E, O, Ka, Ga, Gha, Nga, Ja, Cha, Ja, Ja, Nya, Da, Tha, Da, Dha, Na, Da, Tha, Da, Dha, Na, Ba, Pha, Ba, Bha, Ma, Ya, Ra, La, La, Wa, Sa, Ha, Ang. That's how you say it. Please no video, okay? I'm gonna turn off that permission. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. Don't be shy at any time during this course. I think that's a wise decision. Don't wait till the end. If you have a question, maybe other people have it as well. Just speak up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do now is give you the sounds of these things, and that's a little more complicated than it appears. So I'll explain it. The Sara are fairly simple. The only and this is important, the only distinction between each of the pairs, you see the first three are in pairs, the seventh and eighth one are not a pair, but the first six are pairs. And the only difference between each in the pair is the length. That's important to remember when you start putting words together, because you're going to want to pronounce them differently based on how you read them in English. You have to learn, and I'll try to guide you through it. You have to learn how not to do that. So the difference between these first two is ah. The sound is exactly the same. Ah. You just say the longer than you say the ah. Say that with me. Don't turn on your mics, but say it. Ah. Ah. Don't worry about exaggerating it. In the beginning, probably better to exaggerate it. Try not to make them sound the same. Ah, 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 ah. The first one is It's very short. Try and make it very short. As short as you can, giving an sound. Ah, ah. The second one you say longer. Ah. My Sanskrit teacher encouraged us to go into our bathrooms and recite them to the mirror. I don't know. I don't remember if it was the mirror, but I think the bathroom, the idea is no one will hear you. I don't know. Or go into a closet or something. But you should say these out loud. It's helpful. Remember, Pali was the spoken language first. So the first one is ah. What is like? Like as in but almost. I don't want to say as in anything actually, because we all have different accents, and your accent is not allowed. No matter what your accent is, this one has to be said ah. The second group, eat. This is where it starts to get hard in the beginning, and you have to train yourself. This is not it. It will never be it as in bit, as in how we in English write it. It will never be that. It will always be E, like the letter E in English. The letter E isn't pronounced E. The letter I is pronounced E and E. Just like if you were to say the letter E in English. That's what this letter I is. So we have this one is E E E E E E E E, like that. E E E E. The third one is U U U U U U U U U U U, like that. E U. You see, so each one in the pair sounds exactly like the other. One is short, one is long. Make the first one very short. You can exaggerate the second one as being very long if you want. Just make sure you're able to distinguish them. And once you all learn these, then we'll start practicing them. But I think I'm going to give that for next week. So we're not even going to get there this week. I don't know. No, let's do a little bit this week, but we'll try and do a little more next week. E, A. This one is A, and this one is O. So O is like the letter O in English. O. That's actually how you say it. Always. O. And A, the letter E, is pronounced A. So for Pali purposes, we call this the letter A, and we call this the letter E. which is confusing. And this is the letter A. The letters are named after their sound because the sound doesn't change, unlike English, unlike a lot of other languages. It's funny, you will see a lot of languages that have some roots in Pali or Sanskrit follow this tradition, like Thai. The letters never change, almost never change the way they sound. Cambodian, almost never. It's not entirely true with these languages. They have some flexibility. Burmese, all of the Theravada Buddhist country languages, Sinhala. For the most part, the letters, and they use alphabets that are very similar to this. It's different from English, which doesn't really have a good correspondence between the letter and the sound it makes. So a, I, u, a, o. A is just, there's no accent, there's just A. A as in English, the letter A. A, I, u, a, o. So next week, you're all going to have to be able to say that to me. I'm going to take you one by one. If this will probably make some people quit. Hopefully not, but might scare people away. So you can't be scared away, please.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
For the A and the O, what's the, is it short, long, or it falls in medium?
That's a good question. They are long.
Okay.
Yeah. There's some technical, I think some teachers say if they're followed by a conjunct consonant, if their syllable has a consonant after them, then they're short. And the reason is because the consonant already makes the syllable long. So it's really just technical. They're long. For all intents and purposes, they're long. And that's an important point. Thanks for bringing it up. A, I, u, a, o. That's it. A, I, u. This one, the letter A is going to give you problems. And when I say A, when I say the letters by their names, I'm going to give you the Pali names. So be clear right now about that. This one here is the letter A, not that first one. So this one, you'll see people who are accustomed to Roman languages are going to pronounce this as a or or something like that, right? Like Bante. People call me Bante, but it's Bante. This will always be A. And this one, O is easier. But that's how you have to remember these. So you have two tasks. One is to remember them, to be able to write them down, and writing them down in order is a good exercise as well. In fact, I recommend throughout this course that when I give you homework, the best thing to do, or one of the important things to do, is going to be writing out whatever you have to remember, writing it out again and again and again. It's just the best way, I think. There's going to be a lot of things like that. I'll try to give you some tips on how to make it easier on yourself, but just writing out the alphabet whenever you have some free time. But the other thing is going to be able to pronounce them. So I'm going to ask each of you, when you come back next week, for those of you who come back, to recite the alphabet on the microphone. All right, so those are the vowels. Any other questions about them? Okay. If there are, go ahead and interrupt. The consonants are two sets. One set is grouped and one set is ungrouped. The ungrouped, there's not much to say with them, but they're kind of special. If you know anything about linguistics, these are like the sibilants and the I don't know, they have words for them. Anyway, they can't easily be grouped. But these ones are grouped, and grouping them is useful in order to remember and to know precisely how they are pronounced. So the groups here, these words may not be that familiar to you. The groupings are based on the position in which the sound is formed. Position in your mouth. And so you maybe didn't realize that different sounds are made in different parts of your mouth, but it is the case. And this is how we come to know what each of the sounds sounds like. The first ones are the gutturals. They are formed in the throat area. That's what guttural refers to. Palatial. For these ones, the sound is formed on the roof of your mouth, the palate. For the alveopalatials, they are formed on at the alveopalatial ridge. The alveopalatial ridge is the ridge behind your teeth. It's that bump before you get to the roof of your mouth. So if you put your tongue on your teeth and you go back a little bit, it's smooth, but then there's a jump where the angle shifts. That place where the angle changes is called the alveopalatial ridge. And that's where these ones are formed. The dentals are formed against the teeth, and the labials are formed on the at the lips. So we're going from back of the mouth to the front, basically. Then we have these column headers. And these show that for each sound that is made at each of those places, you have at least 5 different, you have 5 basic sounds, and these are the ones that are used in Pali. There are others. Sanskrit uses some, and of course other languages use other. But of the ones that are used in Pali, there are 4, and they're easy to differentiate. The system is very simple, kind of elegant, and it's based on these headers. So each column represents a different type of sound. That's how it is. So at the back of your mouth or at the palate, you can make 5 different sounds that we use in Pali, plus all of these ones that are some of them are kind of associated with these groups, but forget about them for now. The point is that these ones fit neatly into these categories. So the first category is A minus, V minus, and this is just shorthand. Then we have A plus, V minus, then we have A minus, V plus, and then we have A plus, A, V plus. So we've exhausted all 4 possibilities. Those of you who have math minds understand we have 2 times 2 squared. 2 squared gives us 4. 2 times 2 gives us 4 options. So A refers to aspiration. And if you look at the note below the box, aspiration is the act of emitting breath. I don't even know if that's the official translation, but that's basically it. And what do we mean by that? That's the sound of the breath going through your mouth. It's a sound. It's a breathing sound. V refers to voicing. Voicing is the vibration of your voice box, and you may not have realized that, but not all the sounds we make require the vibration of the voice box. Some of these consonants, any ones that have V minus, the first 2 rows or columns, require no voicing to be made as sounds. Now, each of the vowels is voiced. You can't say any of the vowels without without vibrating of the voice box. But you don't start, the voice box doesn't start vibrating until after you've already said the consonant and you start saying the vowel. That's the difference. So, for example, the difference between ka and ga is that with ga, you've already started to vibrate. G, 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 g. With k, you don't. There's no vibrating of the voice box. There's only the. There's actually nothing. If it's not aspirated, there's not even the sound I'm making. That would be the best you could do, is the snapping sound in the throat. I don't even know if that even requires aspiration, but this clicking is the ga, ga, as opposed to ga, ga, g, 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 g. Try doing that for yourself and you'll see that the only difference is vibrating the voice box. G, 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 g. Another thing I should mention is, as I already did mention, but just to reiterate, that these don't actually make sound, really much sound on their own. They kind of require a vowel. So when I have you memorize, when I have you recite, these are all going to be attached to the letter A. So when you say this one, you usually call it ka. You don't call it ka. You call it ka, the letter ka. K plus A is ka. And you might notice that I'm not saying it the way you would say the letter K in English, because K has an aspiration, and that's these two. So these two rows are aspirated. So the difference between unaspirated and aspirated is whether you make that h sound afterwards. So this one is k, 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 and this one is k, 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 Kate. Which is why if you hear an Indian person say the word karma, it sounds like I just said it. Oh, that's very bad karma. It is not pronounced karma. So your first lesson, something you can share with others, is that when you say that word, it's not karma, it's karma, 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 karma. Or in Pali, we say kamma, kamma. Not kamma. Kamma would be a very different word. That's not actually a word. But it does change in many cases. In many words, the only difference is going to be things like aspiration or voicing. Like gamma is a word. Gamma and gamma. Gamma, gamma. It's hard to even hear the difference. Gamma, gamma, gamma. Gamma. Don't worry if you can't hear the difference there. We're not going to be speaking this to each other, so we're not that concerned about this. But it is an important part of learning the language, how the letters differ. So this row is unaspirated and unvoiced, right? So there's no rattling of the voice box. There's also no h sound. This one is aspirated but still not voiced. So you are going h, k, ch, p, t, p, right? This one is unaspirated but voiced, so ga, 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 ja, 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 da, 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 ba, ba, ba. Don't worry, I'll go through the sounding of these. This is theory right now. I'll go through these again. These ones are both voiced and aspirated, so ga, ja. And when you say these, we're instructed to exaggerate them. My Sanskrit teacher told us to sound like you're actually being punched in the stomach or something. Ga, ja, da, da, ba. We're just so not used to saying any of these letters with a h afterwards. So you have to learn how to do that. Train yourself how to do that. And the final group is nasals. So the nasals have to do with the nose, right? Hence the word nasal, meaning the sound is created through the nose. You can close your mouth and still say these, I think. No, maybe not. No, you have to keep your mouth open, but the sound goes through the nose in order to say these. But they are still using the same part of the mouth. So for the guttural, it's a ang, nga, nga, nga. In English, we don't have a nga sound, but they have it in other languages. Nga, nga. In Pali, they don't have nga either. But you have to be able to say nga, nga, because that's this letter, even though you never say it. It's one of the hardest pronunciations for foreign speakers in Thai language, because in Thai they do have nga. Nga, nga means sesame. Nga, nga. So if you say nga, it's the N, it's like saying NGA in English, which we don't have. Nga, nga. You can feel it in the back of your throat. Or if you say ang, which we do have, ang, like budhang, nga, ang. It's happening in the back of the throat. And the other nasals at each of the positions. So let's go through it, I think, row by row, and I actually to actually give you a sense of how these are all supposed to sound. That was just the theory. Any questions on the theory? Again, I'm probably
I'm
going
confused
too fast, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm confused on. I guess you're gonna get to the last letter, which is the. I've never understood the difference between this letter, the N with the dot on top, and the M with the dot on top. I don't know the difference between them, but I guess you'll get to that.
Yeah, the last. It's just that the last letter of the alphabet is not exactly a letter. In some ways, it isn't even one of the letters of the alphabet, but it's one of the symbols we use. But it's a special symbol. Let's put it that way. Think of it more as a special symbol than an actual letter, and I'll explain how that works. It's not so hard to understand. But it's hard if you confuse it like you're doing. Don't do that. It's not a letter. Think of it as a symbol. It has a special use that I'll get to. So just take it out for now. Pretend it doesn't exist for now, because it doesn't exist in the way these ones do. And then you've got only one to worry about, right? No confusion.
Okay, thanks.
I'll explain what it means, though, at the end. All right, so the first row, these are in the back of the throat. Ga, the first one I already talked about, ga, and I'm putting an a after it. So the a is voiced, but the ga is not. Ga. And then the next one is ka, ga, ka, ga, ka. Those are the first two. The second two are voiced, so ga, 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 ga. So now all four of them together, ga, 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 ga. Be very difficult in the beginning to be able to separate them. I mean, I'm not even perfect. It's not easy to separate them. Ga, 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 ga. And the nasal again is the one in the back of the throat, ang or nga. Nga or ang. Just try and understand it as that nga, nga, nga in the back of your throat. Nasal. Ga, 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 nga. Ga, 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 nga. Those are the first five. And this is how, if you were in a monastery in Asia, you'd have to be able to say them just as I said them. Of course, the advantage you'd have is that your language would be based on them already. It's not a great advantage. It's interesting because in Thailand, they have for example, they have a problem because they've corrupted all of these letters. And so Thai Pali doesn't end up sounding like Pali because they just make it sound like Thai letters. For example, the P's become B's and the D's become T's. It's very strange. So Buddha sounds like Putta. but that's nothing to do with what we're learning. Ga, ka, ga, ga, nga. That's the first row. The second row, these are on the roof. Well, so another thing you're going to have to remember, this is another one that trips people up. The first one that would trip people up, just to read it, to go back, is the letter A. Letter A that looks like our letter E in English. So remember, that's the letter A, and it's pronounced A. This one is the letter ja, and it's pronounced ja, as in C, just like CH in English sometimes, but only when it's unaspirated. So ja, this one is ja, ja, ja. If you put an a on the end, it's ja, 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 ja.
Where should my tongue be when pronouncing this?
Not really anywhere. Cha, 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 cha. Your tongue is kind of used with the palate. It's kind of connected. You're manipulating the tongue against the palate. Cha, 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 cha. I'm probably not even saying it right because now that I think about it, I'm probably using my teeth more to say cha, cha. And that's probably not right. So cha, 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 cha. Ja, and then sorry, this is not that. This is ja, ja, ja. So right, no aspiration. Ja, 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 ja. But it's not ga. It will never be ka, like we'd say in English, or sa, as we sometimes put it. It never changes from ja, 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 ja. As opposed to this one, which also never changes and is always pronounced ja, 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 ja. Cha, ja, cha, ja, 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 ja. It's a very slight difference, but the difference is your voice box starts vibrating before you say the ja, and it doesn't start vibrating until after you've said the ja, 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 ja. Again, don't worry, I'm not going to be too concerned with you getting it exactly right. Most important for your homework is going to be able to get the order, to be able to write it out, and to be able to say them in the right order. So cha, cha, the second one, of course, is aspirated. So cha, cha, cha. And this one is ja, 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 cha, ja, cha, cha. So all together, ja, cha, ja, 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 cha, ja, 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 cha, ja, ja. And the last one is nya, like piñata in Mexican. No, sorry, Spanish. Sorry. They have piñatas in Mexico, right? There's piñatas in Spain. A piñata, ña. Those of you who have Spanish background. Ña.
But I'm where is the palate for the palatal? Because nya, like I put the tongue after the alveolar palatal, right?
Ña,
But before
ña
my
is
teeth.
against
Nya.
ña is against the roof of your mouth. Ña, ña.
Nya. Okay.
No?
But for the other ones, is it like cha? Cha.
Oh, same. This is a good. If you know how to say ña already, you should know how to put your tongue for the rest. The tongue should be in the same spot for all of these. Nya, cha, cha, ja, ja, nya. It's working with the roof of the mouth. Ja, 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 nya.
Is the roof of the mouth the part that comes like?
It's the big bowl, the bowl at the roof of your mouth. That whole big bowl. It's like
Okay.
an upside down bowl or an umbrella. It ends at the ridge, the alveopalatal ridge.
Okay. So I think I'm pronouncing nya wrong then, because I do it with the like my tongue against the dentals or against the front part of the mouth, like nya, not nya.
The ridge, the ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, try and flatten your tongue against the
Nya.
top. Nya, nya, nya.
Nya. Okay.
The next ones are against the alveopalatal ridge, and this is what gives Indian speakers, I guess, with a Hindi background, I don't know, a distinctive sound, because we don't have this sort of sound in Western languages. This is with the tongue curled back generally and placed behind the alveopalatal ridge. So if you curl your tongue back and place the bottom of your tongue against the front of the palate, the front of that umbrella, so press against that ridge, and then say da, da. That's how you get this first sound, da, da, da. And you'll start to get a sense of why speakers from India often have that distinct accent. A part of it is because of having the tongue in the back of your mouth. Da, 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 na. Other than that, it's if you put your tongue there and then you say these the way you would say them in English, you've got it. Da, 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 na. Just make sure that you're aspirating. TH is not tha, it will never be tha. If you make that mistake, don't make that mistake. Da, 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 na. There is no tha sound or sha sound in Pali. TH is always da with an aspiration, so ta. Da, ta, da, da, na. And the next two sets are pretty easy. These ones should be relatively easy. But again, th is ta, not tha. It's just the aspirated form of the first one. So this is with these ones. The dentals are with your tongue touching the back of your teeth. Da ta, da da na. Da ta, da da na. So this N and this N are both pronounced like N's in English. Na, 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 na. This one is not an N, it's a nya, and this one is an ang. So again, don't think of this one as an N, it's a special symbol. Sometimes it has a dot. The old way of doing it was to make the actual ang symbol, the N with the tail on it. They don't use that much anymore though. But these two ends are just na. But the first one, you have your tongue curled back. Da, ta, da, da, na. These ones you don't. You have it against the teeth. Da, ta, da, da, na. The next set is the labials. You're using your lips. Ba, pa, ba, ba, ma. Ba, pa, ba, ba, ba. Sorry, ba, ba, ma. Ba pa, ba bha, ma. Ba pa, ba bha, ma. For the ungrouped, they are sort of related to places in your mouth. There's very technical ways of explaining these. Ya is a palatial, I think. Ya is just how we would say ya in English. There's no special understanding. Ya. But you'll notice that it's being created. Liquids, these are called. This is a liquid. It's not really being stopped by the tongue. It's ya, ya. You're just kind of using the tongue to affect the sound a little bit. Ya, ya, ya. The ya is kind of manipulating the airflow. Ya, ya, ya. Ra is the same. Now ra and la are interesting. Ra is the retroflex and la is the lateral. So what this means is with ra, you're actually going to curl your mouth back and the air goes through the middle of the mouth as normal, but you've got the ra, ra, ra. You'll see if you say ra, you're curling your mouth back a little bit to create that ra, 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 ra. With the la, you're not allowing the air to go through the middle of the mouth. You're letting it go through the sides. That's how we get the la sound. It's called the lateral. So it goes on both sides. La, la. La is, I think ra and la are actually both considered alveopalatal. It doesn't really matter. No, sorry. The la has technically two. One is a dental and one is alveopalatal. So this one with the dot should probably come first. Actually, I'm not sure about that. Ra and la might be palatial. Anyway, la, no, it can't be. It has to be dental, but I don't really know. I'm gonna guess that it's dental. Put that one first. So the la with the dot is like the other ones with the dots under them. The other alveopalatals, in that you curl the tongue behind the alveopalatal ridge. La, 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 ra, ra, la, la. And the other la is how we would say it in English, with it against the teeth, basically. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. Very, very minor difference, but it's useful if you're able to distinguish. I mean, it helps you remember when you're saying it how it's spelled, and it can allow you to differentiate between words, because some words are actually spelled the same, just with or without the dot. They look the same, but they don't sound the same, not quite. Wa is labial. Wa, wa. So the letter V is not va, not really. It's almost wa, like a W. There's a little bit of a va in there, but not. Vipassana, vipassana is almost wa. So you never say vipassana or vipassana, however people say it. That word is highly varied in how people pronounce it, but the correct way is something like vipassana. Vi, like a wa, like a W almost. Wa,
Should our
wa.
lips be touching when we say that?
No. Wa.
Okay, thank you.
Well, part of them are touching. Wa, wa. If they were touching, you couldn't let air out. I mean, they're part of them are touching. You're making a wa, like a wa, wa, wa. Sa and ha are sibilants. That doesn't really matter, but sa is just sa. Nothing special there. It's a dental, I think. You're not touching the teeth, but you're using the teeth to make the sound sa, sa. And ha, I don't know. It might be a guttural. I think there's a bit of debate. It's been a long time, but it doesn't really matter. Ha is just ha, ha, ha. Hoti, hoti. Ha, ha, ha. So these ones you would pronounce ya, ra, la, la, wa, sa, ha. Those are the outwagas. And the last one, as I said, is not really a letter, it's a symbol. And what does that mean? It means it signifies a nasal it signifies a nasal end to a syllable. And so it doesn't have a sound of its own, but the sound it makes depends on the context. If there is no context, it's understood to make an ang sound. So it takes the place of this one, which is hence the question about it. What's the difference? Well, if you just see the word with this is called nigahita, actually. There's two words for it. Nigahita is the one we use in Pali. In Sanskrit, it's called a visarga or something like that. I don't know. Do we have any Indian people here? Somebody knows? Anyway, this one is called a nigahita in Pali. So if you see it in a word and you say, and the word ends with an ang, the word ends with a nigahita, then you pronounce it like this one. That's just the default. But if it is in context, it takes on the sound of the nasal in the group of the consonant following it. So look at number 7 down here. Oh, and I've done it. I prefer, as an aside, I prefer the M with a dot under it. And I don't have any good reason for that. But you'll find this is a bit of a debate. Some people use the M with a dot under. Some people use the M with a dot over. Suffice to say, if it's an M with a dot, it's referring to the nigahita. This is all arbitrary. It's just convention. I think the M with a dot under it is more accepted, but it probably depends what part of the world you're in. All right, this is the one I go with for no really good reason. Okay, but look at this last one. This last one should be familiar to some of you. If you've taken precepts, you know that we have this. This is the beginning of the request. And so what did I say? Just to recap what I said. The nigahita takes on the sound of the nasal, here are the nasals, in the group of the letter, the consonant that follows it. So here's the consonant that follows it. This consonant is in the labial group. It's this one. And so the nigahita takes on this sound, ma. So this should be pronounced aham bhante. That's what the nigahita is and what it does. You'll find that sandhi, which we're going to get into in a couple of weeks, I think, causes the nigahita to change into a nasal. And it's going to change into a nasal because it's going to be stuck with that with a consonant after it. When it's stuck with a consonant after it, you'll see it actually transform into one of the other nasals. But at the end of a word, it's the nasalization, and it takes on the sound of the nasal in the group, the consonant that follows it. So, and then your question is going to be, what about this one? Because these ones are ungrouped, sa is ungrouped, it doesn't change. It's still ang. It takes on the default sound of this first one. So again, the nigahita doesn't have a sound of its own. It takes on a nasal sound. By default, it takes on the first nasal sound, but if it's followed by a consonant, which it usually is, or often is, it's going to take on one of the other sounds. So not always. No, quite often it's going to be followed by a vowel, or it'll be the end of a sentence or something like that. And so then it just takes on the sound of the first one. One thing I would mention as well is that a word cannot end with a consonant. So a reason for the nigahita is to give an ending to words, a nasal ending to a word. A word can't end with any of these. All of these ones are followed by vowels, or they can come after a vowel, but only if they're in the middle of a word. The word cannot end with any of these. It has to end, or any of these either. Well, it has to end with either one of the vowels, the sara, or this one. Sandhi does change that a little bit, but not in any meaningful way. It doesn't actually. So these examples, again, I'm not quite sure why I chose these, but these would give you some idea. These ones, it looks like, are these are showing you the different nasals, actually. So this is the first nasal, sang, ang, gaha. Sang, gaha. One thing to note about this nasal is it's always going to be followed by a consonant, by one of these consonants. This nasal in particular is never followed by a vowel. It's actually quite rare. It's not this nga you're not going to see very often, but they don't have nga in Pali, just like we don't have it in English. So you'll always see ang or ing or that kind of thing. But it'll always be followed by one of these four here. That's not the case with this one, nya. Nya can start, if you know jnana, the word jnana starts with a nya. But if it is followed by a consonant, it's going to be, all of these nasals are going to be followed by, if they're followed by a consonant, it's going to be a consonant of their group, of their wagga. Wagga means group. So the N with the dot under it, the na, will be followed by one of these, da, pandita, bandha, bandha. This na is followed by a dha. But all of these ones can, I'll look up here. All of these ones can be followed by a vowel. It's only this one that is never followed by a vowel. It's a special case. It's just how the language works. There's no rule. It's just they don't have any words. It's not part of how they pronounce things. It's hard to pronounce. They said if you're Thai, it's very easy. Cambodians, talking to the monk here about it, and they have some very strange nya. They have nya. Oh, they have nguyen. Like in Vietnamese, nguyen is a very hard. But in Khmer, they have some very hard things for us to say. So we trade hard things because English has some very hard things for Southeast Asians to say as well. I was trying to get him to say order, and he can't say it because he can't say or. But so this one would always be followed by one of its own group. And then I talked about 6 and 7 already. This here is to explain to you, give you an example in English of, I'm not sure it's a great example, but it sort of fits that when you say skate in English, you don't aspirate the ka. It's skate with no aspiration. But when you say Kate, you generally aspirate it. Kate. We don't aspirate it that much, but this is how some would explain the difference. But just make the difference very exaggerated. Ga, 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 nga. Ja, 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 nya. Da, da, na. Da, da, na. Ba, 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 ma. Ya, ra, la, wa, sa, ha. And then the Nigahita. There I tell you, karma does not equal karma. Keita is an example of where it starts with a ha. Keita. Keita means field. This is probably to show you the difference between the C's. I'm not quite sure, but this is micha jara. This one is hard. You'll often hear this pronounced improperly, but the micha is aspirated, and this one is unaspirated. Jara, jara, jara. Micha jara. Those are just some examples. And that's the vowel. You probably didn't, some of you who weren't familiar probably didn't expect it to be so complicated. Didn't expect us to spend so much time on the alphabet, but I hope you can see that it is a lesson to be learned.
Mante, how do you spell the Nigihita? How is it?
2 G's, I think. Niggahita.
Is there an example where it's used like before any of the palatal? Because it sounds strange to have like nya at the end of a sentence. At the end of a word.
Well, the thing is, it goes with the next word. So, if like this one, hang janami. One thing, this gives me an opportunity to give you a preview of my shorthand. This is some of you might be interested. This is a way of typing Pali without having access to the special characters. The dot goes before the letter, and long letters are just given double treatment. So this is the long A. So if you're interested, I can show you what this actually would look like. That's what these letters down here are for, if I can ever get to them. So sorry, these should be separated. These are two words. This means I know. Ahang means I, and janami means know. I know. It actually, in and of itself, means I know, but put them together, it means I know. So this is ahanjanami. Ahanjanami. Not ahang janami. It's ahanjanami. And a more common example would be let's actually do this because this is much more common. This is not ahangcha. This is ahancha. And you will actually find, as I said, it quite often actually written. And this is really, there's no reason why it would be one or the other. It's just sometimes you'll see it one way and sometimes you'll see it the other. It'll actually be written like this. Ahancha, buddhancha, dhammancha. And you have to say this. If it looks like this, you have to say it as though it was written like this. That's okay. I don't think we have much time for anything else. My thought was this would be an hour class, but I can see it's probably going to generally be more than an hour. So, unless you all have to go after an hour. But that's the lesson for tonight. If there are more questions, we can go for questions. But eventually, I'd invite you to go to the other document. And I think we'll just talk a little bit about the document. This is the Chakupala. For those of you who don't know where these documents are, they're in the pinned messages of the Pali study group channel. You can find links to both documents. So this document, we're going to try to use it. Probably we'll use the first section for quite a few lessons because to start with, none of you are going to be able, unless you've got Pali background, you're not going to be able to do much with this. But we can do some things and we're not going to be able to translate this, but what you can do with this first part is start to practice your Pali on it. So next lesson, we'll start to actually pronounce words. So you haven't even graduated to words yet, but that's the next step, is to actually be able to put these letters together and say words once you know the alphabet. First, you know the alphabet, though. No taking shortcuts. So this first part is just straight Pali. The second part is a straight translation, no explanation. The third part, if you scroll down onto the next page, sorry, I'm on page 3. Forget that you're not seeing what I'm seeing. On page 3 is part 1. And it starts with a verse, but that's not important for now. The first part is straight Pali. Wait, whoops, just to here. Straight Pali. The second part is straight English translation. And the third part is word by word translation. We're not concerned with either the second or the third part right now. Maybe the second part a little bit if you want to read it. But we're not going to be doing translation yet. Some of you might be able to skip ahead, and if you want to, you can talk to me about it. But I think the problem is that I'm not going to have time to go over it with you. I think once people start dropping out, I would be happy if nobody dropped out. But once the people get more serious about it, let's say once everyone is more advanced in it, then we'll start to go through these, and I'll assign you a section apart to translate for the week. But that'll be once we've already gone through at least most of the grammar. So there's no hurry there. For now, what we're going to do is use it as a means of practicing our Pali. So I don't think I have much for you today because I want to wait until we've got our words sorted. But you can see, well, this is how you're going to be using. Let's start at the prose. Ayang, but this would be Ayandhamma desana, right? This one here becomes a na. because it's followed by a dha. Ayan dhamma desana, as though this were an N. Ayan dhamma desana. Katha katha bhasitati savatiyang kang arabhati chakhu pala terang. So here it remains its ang. It just takes the sound of the first one. Savatiyang Kira Maha Suwarno. These ones are with a dot under them, so na. Suwarno Nama. That's a good word to practice the difference. Nama, 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 a, nama. Kutu, kutum, biko. Kutumbiko, ahosi, ahosi. So the O is long. Ahosi. Adho, adho, mahadhano. We haven't gotten into conjunct consonants, but basically, you wouldn't say, these ones basically go together. I don't know how else to say it. Sometimes a conjunct consonant is going to have two distinct sounds, but if it's a double like this, the first one will never be aspirated. It can't be. That just doesn't happen. It will actually be deaspirated. The aspiration will be removed if you try to stick them together like this, which does happen. But you'll have one unaspirated and the second one aspirated. They're aspirated. But the first one doesn't even make a sound here. It has a purpose, but we'll talk about that later. Next week we'll talk about its purpose. Doesn't even make a sound though. Mahabhogo Aputtako. And so on. So if you want, you can use this to practice. I might have you, we'll see how it goes. I might have some of you read this if we're feeling very brave. Maybe not next week. Probably the week after, I'll have everyone read a couple of words from this. So you can practice on this if you want. But your homework is to learn the alphabet, be able to say it, be able to write it in Roman, including the Nigahita. You don't have to write this whole chart out, but it's good if you write it in this way. So put the vowels in a line at the top, put the grouped ones in a rectangle, square, square. And then below that, write these out. So you don't need lines or anything. They don't have to look like this, but first line should be the vowel, the sara. Second line should be these 5. Third line should be these 5, and so on until you do these ones in the last line. Sorry, I'm back in the textbook. Hopefully you're not watching me. I could share my screen if that makes this easier. I can share the window, then you can see exactly what I'm doing. I think I may have done that before. But you still should have, the document open. Not sure why actually, maybe that's not necessary. You should have it open if you want to highlight for me, because you all can highlight stuff as well. If you want to point something out to me, then you go to the actual document and double click on a word or something. Anyway, that's, I guess I'll probably share next week I'll share my window and you can see it. Okay, I'm going to end there. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them, but that's it for the lesson.
Yeah, I have a question. It seemed to me that for this word Mahadano, it seems that the is long.
Mahadano, Dhanno, short. I might have mispronounced it when I was exaggerating it. Mahadano. It is short. It's not going to change. If I mispronounce it, I mispronounced it. You don't have to listen to me saying it because it will not ever be long. If it's long, it's going to have a line over it. It's the rules. The sounds never, ever, ever change. They are what they are. I might mangle it. The person who says it might mangle it, but the rules are, it keeps its sound. Short ones are short, long ones are long. Syllables are a different thing, which is what we'll talk about next. So when you actually say it, the rhythm of it will be long. So for instance, let's just give you a preview. This syllable here, H-A-D, had, is a long syllable. Mahadhanno. Actually, Mahadhanno. So this one is also long. The no is also long. Mahadhanno. So the vowel remains short, but you pause because this is a long syllable. Had, dhanno, dhanno, mahadhanno. That's how you would say that word. Mahadhanno. Stress also goes on the had, and we'll learn why that is next week. Unless you want to read ahead.
Thank you. And I also have another question. I don't know if that's possible, but only if that's possible to change a bit the hour in Romania. Now it's 3:00 a.m.
Well, you all have to tell me if you want to change it. You're going to have to talk about it. And then,
Yeah,
I do have a schedule, so I can't do every hour of every day, but if you let me know, I can let you know what's possible.
We can also, if Ante is going to share his screen, we can, I or someone else can just record it and then like put it on YouTube or something and share it. So it's easier because if you just record the sound, it's like not really that great because you can't follow what's happening in the like highlighting and stuff. But I can record it and then post it because I think this schedule is good for me, and I don't think there's, from what people sent in the group when we were deciding it, like I think it's good for most people too. Or I don't mean to be like excludant or anything, but maybe we can like record it and post it to make it as easy as possible for those who like can't get on at the right time. I don't know. I mean, I'm down to record it if that's the case.
That might just be a good thing to do anyway, regardless of if the, regardless of people not being able to make this time. If somebody has to miss a lesson or whatever, it'd be nice if there were a video recording.
I'm just thinking here, like how the differences in time work, but I think it could be either like because during the middle of the day people work, right? Like between the morning and the evening. So it could be either in the morning, at least for me, this is the evening, it's 9 p.m. for me.
I think at this point, there's no good reason for us to switch times. If we have this many people at this time, as you said, I don't think we can likely find another time, and that would mean all of these people would have to switch their schedule, and we'd lose some of them, most likely. So, unfortunately, we're never going to be able to accommodate everybody. So hopefully the recordings will help. But I think at this point we should probably just say, unless, as I said, I mean, it's up to you all. So unless there's a great number of people who are able to find a better time. I think for this course, this is the time for it. Also, as I said, I'm not available all times either, so this time is pretty good for me.
It's not a problem, I understand. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Later is also fine. If you want to push it back a couple hours, give yourself time to wake up in the morning. That's not a problem for me either, but we'd have to talk about that.
Yeah, I think later is a bit more difficult for people in the Americas. Because, I mean, for me at least, because I have to wake up really early for studying and I still have to meditate. It's a bit late. If it pushed back like a few hours, I think many people wouldn't be able to make it.
You'd all fall asleep.
I think I could stay up, but it would probably mess up my studies.
Well, I don't know what y'all are doing learning Pali when you've got lives to live. This is my Sanskrit teacher. The first thing he said to us was what his Sanskrit teacher said to him. So I'm passing it on to you. He said, my Sanskrit teacher, when he first came into the room, he looked at us all and he said, half of you are going to have dropped out by the end of this course. This is what our Sanskrit teacher told us. His Sanskrit teacher said to him, for the Sanskrit class that he taught, that I was in, half the people dropped out before the end of the class. In our last Pali class that we had on this server, we lost more than 50% by the end. So I'm happy that you're all here. I guess for some people it's just of casual interest. But if you're serious about learning, you do need to, ideally you're living in a monastery and you have lots of time to memorize, because you'll see there's going to be quite a bit to memorize as we go through this. If you don't have a lot of time, be aware that you're going to probably fall behind unless you have a head start.
Will there be a pause in the classes during the January retreat?
Probably, maybe, I don't know. Maybe. Is anyone here going to the retreat in January?
I'm planning to, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I won't be at my computer then, so.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How will the Pali study group benefit me?
I don't know. How would learning Pali benefit you? If you're able to actually put the effort in, and if you have the desire to put the effort in, the chanda, if you're actually able to bring yourself to put the effort into all the memorizing, it will help you to be able to read Pali texts, which is pretty valuable if you're serious about Theravada Buddhism. It's definitely valuable. There's no question. I should have probably said that in the beginning. I mean, it's a very good question you ask. Why are we here? What should our idea be behind taking this class? There's great benefit in learning Pali because you don't have to rely on a translation. And even I still rely on translations, but I can look them up. I can back them up with Pali. And the commentaries are mostly untranslated, so I can read the commentaries. Being able to understand where a word comes from and what words are related to other words gives you a sense of their meaning. Is it necessary? If you don't have it, will you be missing out? I don't think so, no. It more depends how serious you are on studying and perhaps even teaching. If someone doesn't have a good knowledge of Pali as a teacher, it can be a real hindrance. I think people might not. If you're just teaching meditation, okay, no, you don't need it. But to be a qualified teacher and use the Buddha's teaching to back up your teaching, even as a meditation teacher, is very valuable. It helps you avoid mistakes. So as a teacher, as an avid student, if you're serious about Buddhism, at some point you probably should learn Pali. But at some point, if you're at a point where your life is very busy and you're not going to have time to put aside to do all the memorizing that's required. I mean, those of you who are very young probably have a sharp mind, and it's not that big of a deal. And those of you who are meditating, meditation helps you memorize as well, so it won't be that big of a burden, but you have to do the work. If you're not going to do the memorizing, or if you aren't very good at memorizing, you might find this a bit discouraging, or you might find yourself falling behind. I don't know. I had a lot of desire and put a lot of effort when I learned Sanskrit, when I learned Pali, so I don't know what that's like to fall behind like that. But we do see people drop out.
I have a question about the content of the study group. I was wondering if we're going to be looking at chants, or is that later on? Is that like beyond the beginner level?
We are not ever going to be looking at chants. If you want to ask questions about chants, you can post questions in the study group chat anytime. I guess I think that this is fine, that anytime, any day of the week, you're welcome to post a question about anything related to Pali in the Pali study group channel. Doesn't mean I'm going to be the one who answers it, or I'm going to answer it. I don't commit myself to that, but I will try. Usually that kind of question is pretty easy because very technical questions usually. Another thing I will mention, especially for this first lesson, is if you look in the pinned messages, there's a link to a Android application. So if you have an Android phone, there's an app that lets you listen to Pali. and it's got some good reviews and some very bad reviews because people don't quite understand what it was meant for. It sounds pretty awful. I don't make any claim that it's going to sound like wonderful chanting, but the idea behind it is that it gives you both the pronunciation that's mostly correct and the rhythm, which we'll talk about next week. Pali has rhythm, and you have to go by the rhythm if you want to say it correctly. But some people here, there's reviews that calling it like a chipmunk's.
One thing, I am from India, uh, and this seems pretty similar to native Hindi language.
Yes, if you are a Hindi speaker, this should all be, you've learned better than taught. Maybe not. I mean, you may not have known about your language that it was organized like this, but you can already pronounce it probably almost perfect.
Yeah, and that's why I was wondering. I mean, do we have this text in Hindi?
In Devanagari,
Yeah.
we are not going to be studying in Devanagari because, well, most people can't read it, so no. Another resource that, it's funny that we haven't linked this, I'm going to link, is the Digital Pali Reader, which is a tool that was made some long time ago and has recently been put online and then given a whole new look to it. So I'm going to pin that. And this tool, I might even link to some things because we can actually link post links to specific texts. But this tool, for those of you who didn't know about this tool, this will give you a real boost in this course. And I would say it's some tool like this, or if you have another tool like this, going to be essential for this course. Not for today's lesson, it doesn't really help with what we learned today, but it has the whole Tipitaka, the commentaries, the sub-commentaries, extra text. So it has the text from the Chakupala reader, and I can post a link to that later. But let me see. I'll start sharing my screen. This will be a test to share my screen. How do I do this? Screen. Okay, this one. All right. Can you all see my screen now? My window?
Yes, it looks good.
All right. So this is the digital Pali reader. And if I just click here to open the text that we're on, this is the beginning of the Brahmajala Sutta. And maybe I can increase the size for y'all. And so at first glance, this appears to just be a reader. You can read the text, but that's not what it really does. What it was designed to do originally was to translate words. So you come across this word buddhasa, and you want to know what that word means. You click on the word, and it gives you the dictionary definition of Buddha. It doesn't translate buddhasa because it's not meant to give you the answer. It's meant to help you find the answer. You have to have a grammatic. To use this, you have to have knowledge of grammar, which I'm going to give you. But once you have that knowledge of grammar, suppose you don't know what word this came from. I mean, obviously, we can see this is probably from Buddha. But if you didn't know what Buddha meant, you would look at Buddhasa and you'd say, okay, I know what the grammatical form is, but I don't know what Buddha means. So then you'd look here and you'd say, Buddha, one who has attained enlightenment. Of course, we all know what Buddha means. That's not hard. But with some of these, like this one, Bhikkhu Satehi, we see that this word is separated into two words, Bhikkhu, which means a Buddhist monk, I mean literally. So this is the simple definition here. Down at the bottom is a much longer definition, and this is just very zoomed in, but you get a very complete dictionary definition in the screen below. And Satehi, so you'd have to know what Satehi means grammatically, but it comes from 100. In this case, it means 100. It could also mean mindful conscious, but here it means 100. So here, yes, click on Satehi, it changes this to Satta, which means 100. So Bhikkhu Satehi means with 100 bhikkhus. Or you click on this one. This passage was actually what I used to create the reader, so this passage got a lot of working over. This is split into 3 parts, Adhana, Magga, and the Pa, which is just an extra letter, and Patipanno. And so this helps you to translate. It doesn't translate for you. It's a tool that helps you translate by giving you meanings of words. Hoti. There's a good one. This is a good one. Aneka. So it splits words up. Antewasina tells you what, well, it should actually tell you what this one is, what we want. Antewasina, antewasi, one who lives with their master. Literally, but then, if you want to know where antewasi comes from, you can start here. Ante means inside. Wasi means not that, not that. This one, dwelling. So antewasi means one who dwells inside, literally. It's a word that's used to refer to a pupil who lives with their teacher. So the teacher would call the person an antewasi because they're living with the teacher. They're living inside. One who lives with their master. So what I was going to say actually in response to your question is that this can be configured to, can you see this? Yeah, probably you can. Can be configured to use all sorts of scripts. Hopefully they're correct, but what is this? Is this? No, this is good, something different. Here, Hindi. So, and if you can see this, it's now all in Devanagari. Evam me sutang ekang sammayang. So if you're used to using Devanagari, you can find the Chakupala text. The Chakupala text is here, so I can give you a link to that, and you could switch this to Hindi, and you could be reading along in Hindi, in Devanagari. Another thing we have is a converter. So if I go to the Chakupala reader and I take this sentence, copy it, and then I go from Unicode to Hindi, I can paste it into here and it converts it to Hindi. I can take this, put it here, and go from Hindi to Unicode, And it comes out ayang dhammadesana katha bhasitati. So this is a useful tool as well. It is. Velthuis is this Unicode to Velthuis. This is this shorthand, this quick way of being able to say it without the special characters. So long A is two A's, M with the dot under it, put the dot first. So if you want to type me some Pali, you can type it using this format. I'm familiar with this. If you learn this one, it's useful for emails and stuff. Unless you want to get fancy and have the use hotkeys for the keys. It's just a quick way of talking about Pali. All right, so that's another tool.
This is useful. Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, then that's all for this week. Class dismissed.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
week.
you, Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Julie, I think you have to type stop.